behind the steel curtain put out the story that Richard Sherman named the Steelers as a possible landing spot for Stephon Diggs, and I already know why that gets attention. It is a big name. It is a receiver people recognize. It is the kind of offseason topic that makes fans stop scrolling and start imagining some crazy loaded offense before they even ask if the move makes sense. But excuse me, this is where the Steelers have to be smarter than the headline. I am not interested in collecting names just because the name still carries weight. I'm not interested in bringing in another receiver just because people remember what he was at his peak. Pittsburgh already did the important work here. They added DK Metcalf. They added Pittman. They got Jeremy Bernard. That is not a desperate receiver room. That is not a room begging for another veteran to come in and take over the conversation. That is a room that finally has some balance to it, and that is exactly why this Diggs idea is a hell no for me. You can respect the player and still hate the fit. You can acknowledge the career and still say Pittsburgh should not touch this situation. That is where I am. Diggs comes with a big profile, big expectations, and a reputation that is going to follow him into any building he walks into, fair or not. And the Steelers do not need that right now. They do not need another receiver storyline. They do not need another personality people are going to dissect every time the offense has a quiet week. They do not need another player who changes the whole tone of the room before the group even gets a chance to grow together. This team finally has a chance to walk into camp with a receiver room that feels like football, not a weekly television debate. That should matter. Bernard is the type of young player you should want to pour into. He is talented, hungry, and exactly the kind of fresh piece that can grow inside the offense if the Steelers actually give him space to do it. Pittman is the type of veteran who makes a room easier, not louder. He gives you size, toughness, reliability, and a professional presence that fits what Pittsburgh should be trying to build. Then DK is the big dog. He brings the flash, the power, the edge, and the emotional fire. But there is a difference between having one tone setter and turning the room into a personality contest. DK already gives you enough heat. Pittman gives you balance. Bernard gives you youth. That is a good mix. That is a room with roles. That is a room where the coaches can actually build an identity instead of spending half the season trying to keep everybody satisfied. So when I hear Diggs connected to the Steelers, I do not get excited. I get annoyed because it feels like the kind of move people want because it sounds fun, not because it solves a real problem. What exactly are the Steelers missing so badly that they need to create another target battle? What is so broken about this room that they need to bring in an older veteran with star expectations and a whole cloud of attention around him? I do not see it. If Pittsburgh had nothing at receiver, different conversation. If DK was the only legitimate weapon, different conversation. If Bernard was just some random camp body and Pittman was not in the building, then maybe you take the call and think about it. But that is not the situation. The Steelers already have enough talent to run a real offense. They have enough size to bully teams. They have enough versatility to move pieces around. They have enough youth to develop. And they finally have a room where the roles can make sense without forcing anything. That is the part people keep skipping. You do not need to turn a good thing into a chemistry experiment just to prove you are aggressive. At some point, the front office has to trust the room it built instead of acting like every available name deserves a meeting. That is why this should be a no from the start. And from a pure football standpoint, the math does not work the way people want to pretend it works. Everybody loves saying add another weapon, but nobody wants to answer who loses the touches. DK Metcalf was not brought to Pittsburgh to be some decoy who gets 3 targets while the offense tries to keep everybody happy. Pittman was not added, so his role could get squeezed before he even settles in. Bernard should not be pushed into the background the second a famous veteran becomes available. The tight ends still need to be involved. The backs still need touches. The Steelers still have to run an offense that matches their identity. And unless this team suddenly turns into some spread it out, throw it 50 times operation, there's only so much food on the table. That is the part fans skip. When the name is exciting, they picture the highlight reel, not the weekly reality. They picture the depth chart on paper, not the Sunday afternoon where Pittsburgh wins 20-16, throws the ball 25 times, leans on the defense, runs the clock down, and one of the receivers walks out with 2 catches. That is the NFL. That is especially the Steelers. So before anybody screams about Diggs, explain the role. Is he taking targets from DK? Is Pittman becoming the third option? Is Bernard barely seeing the field? Are the tight ends just standing around? Is the offense suddenly being built around keeping 4 receivers emotionally satisfied? Because that is not how you win. That is how you create a problem that did not need to exist. The Steelers should be trying to build clarity right now, not confusion. DK should know he is the lead outside weapon. Pittman should know he is the steady, physical, reliable target who can make the offense easier. Bernard should know there is a real path for him to earn work and become part of the future. Those roles actually make sense. Diggs complicates all of that. He walks in and instantly the conversation changes. It becomes less about the offense growing and more about who is getting enough targets, who is happy with their role, and what the pecking order really is. That is not worth it when the room already has what it needs. And let's be honest, this team does not need to chase drama-adjacent situations at receiver anymore. Even if Diggs shows up motivated, even if the contract is reasonable, even if he says all the right things, the Steelers are still volunteering for attention they do not need. Why? Because the name is big? Because a podcast clip sounded interesting? Because fans want another move to talk about? That is not good team building. Good team building is knowing when to say enough. The Steelers already made the splash with DK. They already added the dependable pro with Pittman. They already invested in the young piece with Bernard. That is your room. Let it breathe. Let the quarterback build chemistry with those guys. Let Arthur Smith figure out how to use them without turning every week into a target management exercise. Let Bernard actually grow instead of treating the rookie like an accessory. This is where restraint matters. It is easy to keep adding talent in theory. It is harder to understand the personality mix, the development timeline, and the way an offense actually functions over 17 games. The Steelers need receivers who fit the mission, not receivers who make the offseason feel more exciting. They need a room that can handle a low-volume passing game without turning weird. They need players who understand their jobs and buy into the bigger picture. Diggs may still help a team, but Pittsburgh should not be the team taking that swing. The reward is not big enough because the need is not real enough. That is the whole point. This is not a move you make because you are building something. This is a move you make because you are bored, and the Steelers cannot afford to be bored with the receiver room when they finally have one that makes sense. That is why my answer is not complicated. Hell no. Respectfully, loudly, clearly, hell no. Richard Sherman can float the idea, fans can debate it, and the article can make people curious, but the Steelers should not let a big name talk them into a move that does not match what they are building. This team needs peace at receiver. I know that word does not sound exciting, but peace matters. Stability matters. Fit matters. A room that can show up, work, compete, and not become the center of the football universe every time the offense has a slow quarter matters. Pittsburgh should cherish that. Bernard should be treated like part of the plan, not like a young player who gets shoved aside the moment somebody famous becomes available. Pittman should be allowed to settle in as the grown man in the room, the reliable target, the guy who does not need the spotlight to help the offense. DK should be the alpha presence, the emotional spark, the physical matchup problem, but he should not be surrounded by more volatility than the room needs. That is the balance. That is the formula. And if the Steelers are smart, they will protect it instead of getting seduced by a name. The best teams do not just ask if a player is talented. That is the easy part. The better question is whether the move helps the whole operation. Does it help the locker room? Does it help the offense define roles? Does it help the young players develop? Does it make the quarterback's life easier? Does it keep the room focused? With Diggs, I do not like the answers enough to take the risk. The move sounds better in a graphic than it would feel in the building. It sounds better during a slow news week than it would feel when the Steelers are trying to prepare for Baltimore, Cincinnati, or Cleveland, and the conversation is about touches again. Pittsburgh does not need that. They need clean football. They need their offensive pieces to settle in. They need fewer distractions, not more. They need the main conversation to be about execution, protection, timing, route spacing, and finishing drives, not whether another receiver should be more involved by the second quarter. And no, this is not about being scared of talent. It is about understanding that talent only works when the fit is right. Diggs could still find a role somewhere else and help another team. Good for him. But the Steelers do not have to be the team that turns its own receiver room into a crowded argument. They do not have to make Bernard's path harder. They do not have to make Pittman's role smaller. They do not have to put another star-level expectation next to DK and hope everyone is cool when the ball gets spread around. That is unnecessary. That is force. That is the kind of move that looks aggressive but really just creates more questions. The Steelers have their star. They have their professional. They have their young piece. That is enough. Let the offense grow around that. Let the coaching staff develop that. Let the quarterback build trust with that. Stop trying to add another layer just because the name makes the room look louder. Sometimes the smartest thing a front office can do is close the door on a tempting idea before it becomes a problem. This should be one of those times. The Steelers should not chase the Diggs conversation. They should not flirt with it. They should not let outside noise convince them they are one more receiver away from fixing something that is not broken. Keep the room simple. Keep it stable. Keep it about football. That is how this team should approach it. So when I hear Steelers and Stephon Diggs in the same sentence, I am not celebrating. I'm saying, no thank you, keep moving. We already have what we need. Let another team chase the headline. Pittsburgh should protect the chemistry it finally has and go win games with the group already in the building. That is the adult move. That is the winning move. That is the kind of decision boring teams make in June and smart teams get rewarded for in January.